it's just me and you alone, never lonely.
So, hello, Adrian. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate you being here.
Oh yeah, and good to be with you.
Of course, of course. So, can you start off by just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so Adrian Miller, I was born and raised in the Denver metro area in Colorado, which immediately loses me all street cred on the subject of soul food and barbecue. But the way I win people back is my parents are from the South, so my mom's from Chattanooga, Tennessee, and my dad's from Helena, Arkansas. So these are my food traditions.
Okay, yeah, you
I
definitely
grew
have cleared back.
yeah. So then I went to Stanford University for undergrad, and then I went to Georgetown Law School. Then I came back to Denver and practiced law for about 4 years. Hated it. Got to the point where I was singing spirituals in my office, so I figured I should do something else. So I was going to open up a soul food restaurant, but then I got a chance to work in the Clinton White House. I worked on something called the Initiative for One America, which was about racial, ethnic, and religious reconciliation. And then after that, I came back to Denver. I worked at a think tank for a little while, and then I decided to write this book on the history of soul food. But the food stuff is all fun. We'll get to that in a second. But the food stuff's all fun, but my it's not lucrative. So my day job is a mostly part-time job where I work for the Colorado Council of Churches. I'm the executive director of that organization, and that organization gets churches together to build relationship and do social justice work.
Mm, very interesting. And so, with what the work you do with the churches, does it also include food? Because I mean, I know a lot of times that's where you kind of gather around.
Yeah, some of our biggest events have been around food.
Mhm.
And so, because one thing I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get more partnerships between black and white churches,
Mhm.
and I'm finding that food is probably the best way to do that. But it's hard to maintain momentum on these racial reconciliation things because a lot of people just want kind of a quick fix. And given the challenges that we have in our society, this is stuff that's going to take a while to break through.
No, that is definitely understandable, but I'm glad that you're doing that work because it's very important for sure. And so, going a little bit back, you talk about how you began your career as a lawyer, right? You worked for the Clinton administration as a special assistant. You were also a policy analyst for the Colorado governor. So, you had a lot of kind of time in that realm. And so, what kind of got you into food in the first place? Were you always into cooking? When did you think, okay, I'm going to write a book about soul food?
So yeah, I mean, growing up, my mom worked nights, and so when she came home in the morning, she was just too tired to make breakfast for my twin sister and my little brother. All of us were around the same age. I have two older brothers, and so we had to cook for ourselves. And so no, look, I mean, it was not glamorous stuff. It was mapo, malto meal, cream of wheat,
Also, it was good.
yeah, pancakes, scrambled eggs with eggshells. It was that kind of stuff. But then, as I got older, I tried to make different things just to give my mom a break on the weekends. And so, yeah, so I always had an interest in cooking. And it got more intense my third year of law school because I was blessed enough to have a couple of offers. So I kind of eased back a little bit. Maybe I started watching these cooking shows, because back then, the Discovery Channel and a couple other channels actually had more regular cooking shows. But the short answer for how I got into this is unemployment. So I was trying to get back to Colorado after the Clinton administration, but the job market was really slow. And so I was watching a lot of daytime television. I'm not even going to tell you what shows. And I said, I should read something. So I went to the bookstore and I was, because I was interested in cooking, I was browsing the cookbook section. And then I saw this book on the history of soul food, or sorry, history of Southern food by this guy named John Edgerton. It was called Southern Food at Home, on the Road, in History. And so I picked that book up, and he wrote that the tribute to black achievement in cookery, in American cookery, has yet to be written. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And so I thought somebody had done it because the book was about 12 years old when I picked it up. And I emailed him, and he said, you know what? Nobody's really done it yet. So that's what's really launched the journey.
Mhm. So you decided you're going to be the one that added to that kind of scholarly works, and I think that's incredibly important. And so, since you entered the food world, where you're dubbed the soul food scholar, so you definitely picked up that baton there. So, before we talk about the book that you wrote, how do you define soul food yourself, or just Black food in general? How do you even tackle a project like that?
Right. So, going into the project, I thought it was going to be much more discreet than probably what I had, heard. Because all you hear is that, oh, soul food is just the food that white people didn't want. It's the food that we took certain ingredients and made it delicious. It's all the stuff, all that kind of stuff. And so as I delved into it, I was like, no, this is a much more rich and complex story. I mean, it's a bringing together of West Africa, Western Europe, and the Americas. So I tell people that soul food is one of the African heritage cuisines in the United States, because I think Creole food and Low Country food of, say, like Charleston and Savannah is different. I think Southern food is different as well. There's a lot of overlap with all of these, but I think soul food is something distinct. It's really the food of the American South that Black migrants took to other parts of the country, and so it gets transplanted. Substitutions have to be found, or the menu gets limited because they're just not in that same place that they once were, and you get interaction with new ethnic groups, new neighbors, and so that comes together and forms its own thing. A lot of people ask me, what's the difference between Southern food and soul food? And I say soul food tastes better.
I think that you're accurate on that, but I like the idea though of Black food, especially in America, having multiple different cuisines, right? Being multi-layered, because there is a very much a difference between those different cuisines. So it's important to break those down. And so I know that I think this is before you wrote the book, that you were working at Southern Foodways Alliance. Um,
So yeah, so I wasn't on staff, but I was on the board.
mhm.
And so one of my roles was I helped plan the annual symposium, because the annual symposium, it's really fascinating. They key in on one subject, one theme, and then the idea is that the symposium brings together thought leaders, scholars, chefs, restaurateurs, food writers, all of these people, and they talk about different subjects that connect to that theme. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. So I did that for, I guess, 6 years, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And so I know that was all the way from 2004 to 2010. And I know now that we're in 2021, right, there's been a lot of kind of reckoning about who speaks about soul food, who's represented, how all those things go. And so for you personally, what do you see there? Do you think that there's enough representation of Black people writing about soul food, about these different things on like a national platform like one you have? Do you think there's a lot more work that needs to be done, and how can that be accomplished?
Well, it's certainly better than when I started 10 years ago. Because I mean, there was only maybe two to three other people who were regularly writing about soul food who weren't like food editors for a newspaper. So I'm just talking about people doing freelance writing and other things, writing books. So now it just seems like there's a lot more, but there's always more that can be done, because I still think, if you look at just the sheer amount of things that are published now, I mean, how much really speaks to African American food? I would say still a small proportion, and very, very little about Africa. So, my hope is in the near future that we're going to see more Black writers talking about these food traditions. And the other thing that's cool is right now it's probably the easiest time to create content, and there are a lot of platforms. The struggle is, given your place in life, is just being compensated
Mm.
for your content. It's really easy to put content out there, and there's only a few people that can do that without having to be supported. Um, and so we want to get to a point where people are supported for the content that they create, because that just makes things a lot easier.
Yes, no, it's definitely important, especially given kind of like the wealth disparities and things like that, they especially make it harder for Black people to be able to do that and compensate it. So that's very important. But for you personally, I mean, you have done great work, with bringing these African American food heritage to the forefront. You've written three books now. So the first one, of course, you published was Soul Food: The Surprising Story of an American Cuisine, One Plate at a Time, for which you won a James Beard Award. So that's amazing. And then you went on to follow that up with The President's Kitchen, really talking about all of these African American chefs who worked in the White House. And then now you're releasing your third book, Black Smoke: African Americans in the United States of Barbecue, on April 12th. And so I was looking that you did a lot of research for this barbecue book. I know that you're a barbecue judge in Denver, that you did a traveling tour, really tasting barbecue all over the country, which sounds amazing. And so can you just talk about like Black Smoke and how you got into barbecue and what you want to accomplish with this book?
Well, I wrote Black Smoke because I'm just tired of white dudes getting all the credit when it comes to barbecue. Because if you look at barbecue media, I mean, how much African American representation is there? Which is crazy, because anybody's with any exposure to Black culture know that that barbecue is a huge part of our food culture, and there's a ton of people barbecuing all across the country. But the big problem is when it comes to food media, the people who decide what stories to get told tend to be white, and if they don't value diversity, then only other white people are presented as experts and authority in certain food subjects. So what I say Black Smoke is part celebration because we want to give these cooks due because there've been a lot of good books that have talked about African American barbecuers. So I wanted to make sure that we had a book by an African American looking at the culture and celebrating its gloriousness. But then also it's a restoration. It's the reminder that if you're going to talk about barbecue in the United States, you cannot adequately and completely tell that story without including African Americans. And so that's why I endeavored to write this book. And when I wrote the book, I would say that the food media about barbecue was not diverse, but I think there's signs of improvement very recently. And I'll give you two examples. In the cookbook realm, there's Rodney Scott and Kevin Bludso have books on the way, and we haven't had a barbecue book by an African American barbecue book by an African American in 25 years, and we haven't had a book by an African American, restaurateur in barbecue in 30 years.
Wow.
So think about all the books on barbecue that come out every single year. So why is that? Another example, and I talk about this in my books, the Barbecue Hall of Fame, which when I first noticed it had 33 inductees and only one, 30 inductees and only one was African American. And so I criticized them in the local paper, the Kansas City paper, and to their credit, they invited me on the board. So I'm pleased to say that the last two classes have had African Americans, including the first African American woman, Desiree Robinson of a Cozy Corner restaurant in Memphis. So there's still a lot of work to do, but there's improvement. But there's so many people that need to be celebrated.
Yes. What I just love though, it seems like every time that you see that there's a gap or something, you're like, okay, I'm going to be the one that kind of goes in and shakes things up and fixes it. So that's excellent. Just putting that action in there to really get that representation out. And like you said, I recently seen Rodney Scott's episode of Chef's Table on Netflix, which is one of the first times I'd seen that. So it's amazing. And I'm looking forward to all of these good books to cook through and review. And so
Now, when on Chef's Table, were you paying close attention to the credits? Did you notice a name in the credits?
no, was your name in the credits?
Yes.
It's so silly. No, I will say I did not look at the credits. So you consulted on that show?
Yeah, I did.
Oh wow, that's really amazing. So can you talk a little bit about the part that you played?
So early when they were conceiving what the show would be like, I spent like an hour on the show with two producers, so 2 hours total, just talking through what I saw as the current issues in barbecue, much like what we just discussed. Why I see there's historical misrepresentation of barbecue, and they're very receptive. So there was a little bit of talk about me getting on the camera, but I was left at the altar, so that never happened.
Well, I'm sorry that you didn't get your debut, but at least, like you said, they, had their ear to the ground of people who are doing this work here. So that's excellent. And when I watch it again, I'll definitely look for you.
I was just messing with you. I didn't expect you to watch all the credits.
No, it's all good. And so talking kind of about what's been coming out recently, different things like that. You actually first caught my eye because you're featured in The Rise, right? Which I see is right there on your back shelf as well. So can
Yeah.
you talk a little bit about that experience of being, seeing yourself featured in there? You inspired three dishes in the book, hand pie with andouille and callaloo. Callaloo is like
Like a green. It's like
a
green.
green, right? Yeah. And grit cakes, and then also rainbow trout with slab bacon. And so what did you think about your feature in that? And how do those relate to the dishes that you study?
So so it was cool to be included because I can't say that I get shine all the time. So, Marcus Samuelson is definitely one of the leading culinary figures in our country. And so, when he does something, it's going to draw attention. So just to be included with the chefs is great. And it's a sense of validation because I can't, maybe you'll understand this and it's not surprising, but, I had to drink a lot of haterade over the course of my writing career from others who said, oh, this is interesting, but it's not, it doesn't fit our portfolio or it's not part of our catalog. So that's what I heard from literary agents and, publishers, editors. And then others would say, oh, there's already enough soul food books on the market, even though there hadn't been one in 20 years.
That's still
Or
enough though, right?
yeah, or nobody's gonna read this. It's interesting, but nobody's gonna read this. Or you don't have enough game to write a book. So it's interesting that we're talking today because I just got news today that my soul food book is going into its eighth printing. So
Congratulations. So
yeah,
it's definitely a lot of people who want to see what you wrote. I mean, I'm excited to read the book, so that's
yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. So, the inspiration for the recipes, some surprised me, but the other ones like the rainbow trout really speaks to my kind of Colorado upbringing, and so that made a sense. But it was just great to be included.
That makes sense. And that's a question that I want to ask. I know you started off talking about, okay, you're from Colorado, writing about soul food. And so, what is the soul food scene like in Colorado? Yeah.
Oh, it's thriving. It's the heartbeat of the national soul food scene. You didn't know that? I'm
I,
just kidding.
I,
Uh,
I was like, man, maybe I need to do more research.
yeah. The soul food. Well, COVID has really thrown a wrench into it, but our soul food scene is not as thriving as it once was because our historically black neighborhood is seriously gentrified in the last 15 years. So a lot of these restaurants have just disappeared, and then there's also generational change. What has I've noticed not only in Denver but across the country is that a lot of times the kids of the people who have started some of the classic restaurants are not interested in being a part of it, and I'm sad that that happens, but I can't fault him because running a restaurant is hard. It's not easy doing that. And so a lot of places have closed. So, in fact, we lost a really great black run barbecue place here because of COVID. Because just the drop off, if you're in a prime real estate location and you can't get foot traffic and people staying there sitting down and staying a while, ordering more drinks, that kind of, you're just going to lose, you're going to be hemorrhaging cash. So a lot of places closed. So we only have a few spots right now. And I would say there's still places to go. And in fact, if you have an Apple phone, I wrote a guide to black-owned restaurants in Denver for Apple Maps.
Oh,
So
cool.
you can just go Soul Food Scholar Apple Maps.
Excellent. I definitely will include that link. Denver's definitely a place I've always wanted to visit. Of course, like go to ski lounges and everything like that. So I would love to partake in that scene. And so, talking a little bit, you know a lot about food. Clearly, you wrote a map about the soul food scene. But what is food like for you at home? I mean, you're interested in food, but do you cook?
Yeah, I got skills. Um,
Okay.
you
Okay.
know, but a lot of times, well, so it's really interesting right now because of the pandemic, I'm eating far more takeout than I ever did because I'm trying to support restaurants. So, before that, a lot of times it was for me, it was just like broiled fish and a salad. That was like a typical meal. And then every once in a while, I'll make soul food. But when it comes to making soul food, I like making mustard and turnip greens with smoked turkey, black eyed peas with some ham hock and some cornbread. Like that's a great meal to me.
I mean,
If I'm going to add something else, I'm much more into fried fish than say chicken. I mean,
mm,
I'll certainly eat chicken, but I love bone in whole catfish. Just love it.
no, like you said, whole, especially whole fish, it's just the flavor is just a different level. So that sounds amazing. And
Hmm.
so, what would you say then is your favorite food destination where you can just eat your way through somewhere?
You mean like in terms of a city?
Yeah, a city, a country.
In terms of just like having it all, I have to say I had the most fun in the Bay Area. So
Mm,
San Francisco and Oakland, just amazing food. Um, and I'm just going off the sheer variety.
mhm.
Of course, there's always New York. New Orleans is also a great place. But I gotta tell you, Houston is a serious eating town. If you have not been there yet,
I have. Yeah, I had some of their barbecue there.
that's a yeah,
Wow.
that's a serious eating town. So those are the ones that immediately come to mind. Those four places.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's funny actually because I was just going through and editing an interview I did with Chris Williams, who owns Lucille's down in Houston, and I've seen now, like as I'm going to start posting it, that he has even more things coming out. So I feel like that scene is really going up, and the work he's doing with the nonprofit down there is amazing. So good work in Houston.
Yeah, where did you get your barbecue? I'm curious.
It's been a couple years now, but it was a black owned spot. I don't know. It was,
Burns,
what do you say?
Burns, or Ray's?
A Raise. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
it was Raise.
Burns and Ray's. So in my Black Smoke book, I list my 20 top places, and those two places are in it.
Yes, and they were it was just so warm. It just you felt like you were just walking into family. I was like, wow, because I'm from California originally. I'm like, we don't have this type of feel. Like I loved it so much. So it was
It was
amazing.
packed. I mean, I went there on a Thursday afternoon, I think, and it was packed.
Hmm.
What you would not expect. I thought it was going to be a downtime.
Mm, no, it definitely, but it has a lively feel, just like you're going through. So I really enjoyed it. I can't wait to get back to Houston. And so I would just say, like, talking about these different chefs, restaurants doing big things. Who would you say that you kind of admire in the food world, or that you kind of have seen really making moves that you're really appreciating right now? I know it's a big question.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of people. So, you've got like Eduardo Jordan in Seattle, not only running the top restaurants, but he's got like educational website. So he has a glossary just so people can get more understanding of the cuisine. He's got a clothing line. He's doing, jams and other kind of stuff. So he's really diversifying. So he's making the most out of this moment after getting such a huge spotlight with the double James Beard Award winning win. I like what Rodney Scott is doing in barbecue. I mean, he's got a chance to really blow it up big in the way that so many of his white counterparts have. I do wonder how much people are going to be feeling whole hog cooking, but we'll have to see. What Mashama Bailey is doing in Savannah with the Port City cooking and winning a James Beard and and I don't mean to say that winning a James Beard is validation completely, so I don't want to get away from, I don't want to say that, but it's noteworthy, and I think it should be celebrated. What she's doing, I like what Todd Richards does. His Soul cookbook is beautiful.
Yeah.
I think about Tony Tipton Martin, what she's doing now, running America's Test Kitchen. So we have to do what we can to support. So I just want to say this public service announcement. So my experience has been is that, and I'm speaking for myself, but I know other Black authors, and I would even say restaurateurs have experienced this. A lot of my support comes from white people. If you look at my following, who buys my books, and who shows up to my book events, it's majority white people. And so, I guess my message to people of color is, look, it's one thing to criticize, rightfully, all of these other media outlets and restaurants and all these things that aren't respecting diversity. But then when they make a change and they start putting Black creatives out in front of you, you have to support us, because you have to understand that most of these people are running a business. And if they put us out there and our books don't sell, or you're not clicking on our social media, they'll be like, see, y'all are telling us to do all this stuff, but nobody support it. So you have to show up for people. So please buy people's books. Please go to their restaurants, order. If they're creating stuff, and if you have the resources, just support people. And the easiest thing is this social media. It does not cost you anything except a little bit of time to like somebody and to retweet, repost, or whatever. That's the coin of the realm right now. And I think about the young woman, the poet Amanda Gordon. Is that her last name?
Mormon, I think.
Gorman.
Mhm.
Because of that moment, she went from, what it was like 50,000 followers maybe to a million. And do you know how a million plus? She's probably at 2 million now. Do you
Yeah,
know what
she was
leverage?
on the Super Bowl yesterday. Like
Yeah,
she's everywhere. I love it.
right. Do you know what kind of leverage that gives her to do other stuff and help others? So, and one last thing, my Instagram following tripled because Samin Nosrat, who does Salt Fat Acid, she just said, "Hey, support Adrian," and
Wow.
she had a 500,000 followers, and she tripled my following just by doing that. So
Wow.
anyway, I'm sorry to hijack. I just had
No.
to say we have to support.
Please, this is not a hijack. I think that that's incredibly important, right? Because, like you said, like it's one thing to critique, but another thing to build and support what's out here. And there's a lot of people making moves. So, no, I think it's an amazing thing. I mean, even for me, I just recently have to go pick up my new copy of For the Culture magazine that was just created, I think, by Clancy Miller about, Black women in food. Just there's so many things to support. Mashama Bailey here in New York, she had a partnership with Intersect by Lexus, bringing the gray here. Like you said, just support, support, support. So I definitely agree. And that one way to support as well is, of course, to buy your new book, Black Smoke. So that's definitely I can't wait to put this up closer to when it's going to come to just help get the word out. And so
Cool.
just to kind of wrap up for a couple last questions, what legacy do you want to leave on the culinary world?
So I hope my books are an appetizer, and I say that because I just hope that people will take my work and build upon it. I think it's very solid work. I work hard to prove everything I say. But I have only a certain amount of information, and as an author, you take what's available and you try to write the best book that you can. So down the road, there's going to be more of information available. Because more and more stuff is being digitized, and so people may say, oh, Adrian didn't know about this, or maybe he missed this, and add that. So I just hope people think of me as a curious guy with an appetite who wrote appetizing books that shared our culture, and found out ways to maybe find ways to connect us through food.
I love that. I definitely do. And I think that you're definitely achieving that. And so I know Black Smoke is coming out on April 12th. Are there any other projects that you want to amplify or share that are coming up?
Uh, they're not ready for a prime time yet, but I'm thinking about a food-based dining guide for difficult conversations. It's like I call it the welcome table. That's the working title of that. So how do we bring people together to talk about difficult conversations? Thinking about a book on the history of Black Colorado because it's pretty fascinating actually. And then I think the last food book I want to write is one on the history of Black street vendors and how
Mm.
they built the food scenes of some very vital cities like New Orleans, Philadelphia, Charleston, Savannah, New York, and really help shape the food scenes of those cities.
Wow, I mean, that sounds amazing. I feel like that when I think about street vendors, I don't think about Black people. And so that sounds great. I'm excited. I need to get all your books and dive in soon and everything like that. So I wish you much success with everything that you have going on. I hope that this new book is a huge hit. Congratulations again on getting the reprint of Soul Food. And yeah, I'm excited to let you know about what we all think about the book. So thank you again for joining me, Adrienne. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Peace.
Bye bye.
Lay your head on my pillow, say, ooh.